All right, we're live. We're back. My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today I'm with Stephen Cole. Stephen, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Sonny.
Yeah, I've got a good feeling about this episode. So it turns out we kind of sort of followed one another or something on Twitter, but I don't know. Your name just it stands out in my mind. It's got like a place carved out for sure. So I'm
Likewise.
yeah, yeah. So you 2013, is that when you got into Bitcoin?
Yeah, 2013. And I know that you and I have been in a bunch of the same, at least social circles, maybe even physical rooms over the years. And through the magic of Twitter, kind of amping each other up and trying to move this Bitcoin stuff forward. So it's really cool to connect in this way.
Yeah, sounds good. So I like to just kick it off with a paragraph. I don't know, a couple sentences on Castle, right? What are you building at Save with Castle? I keep it short now, and then we get back to that near the end of the interview. But let's dive right into the deep end. Tell people what you're building today.
Love it. Yes, I'm co-founder and CEO of Castle. Castle is building financial infrastructure for small and medium businesses powered by Bitcoin and made possible by Bitcoin. So we think that businesses, especially small and medium businesses, everyday businesses, the kind that you think of when you walk down the sidewalk, when you drive down the street, and you just see the signs, they've been sort of overlooked and underappreciated in terms of the solutions that have been available for a long time. And the way that they accumulate Bitcoin, the way that Bitcoin might be able to benefit their business is pretty specific. And it's much different from a platform you're building for an individual to buy or trade Bitcoin or a Wall Street behemoth to accumulate Bitcoin. And so we're just laser focused on SMBs, the 35 million SMBs in the US alone, and building the best platform for them to get ahead and get a leg up on their competition by upgrading their financial stack to Bitcoin powered products.
Wow, that's that's a powerful mission. I like that a lot. Obviously, yeah, that really resonates. Okay, I'm really excited to do obviously like a double click. My brain's already going into like 100 different ways, but I'm gonna try and stick to my script here. I always find the company, the money, all that stuff falls a bit flat unless you know a little bit about the person, right? So take me back to young Steven, right? Well, what was the kid like before computers and capital markets took over your life?
Yeah, man, I love the question. So I just turned 40, and so I was born in '86. I was pretty young when the internet was starting to become accessible. So I remember life pre-internet, and kind of saw how the internet happened, how misunderstood it was initially, and kind of seemed far out there. And then the world was just utterly transformed by the internet. And I think that there's just a lot that I experienced in that and saw in that I think applies to how Bitcoin can potentially transform the world and can transform businesses for the better. And I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, a small town in Missouri. And so, after college, where I studied computer science, I moved to Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, because I really just felt pulled towards internet tech. But small town Midwest still feels like home, and I remember just going to church every Sunday and then like walking down the sidewalk of the small town square in the home that I had and seeing all the business owners who were there. And it wasn't as franchised and kind of everything hadn't been gobbled up by private equity in the way that it has today. And so you could see a lot of physical business owners who were just like there in the business doing their thing. And the sense of ownership and pride and craftsmanship that a business owner brings to it when they're building something that they love and care about is just something that really stuck with me, and I have an appreciation for. And so as I thought about how Bitcoin is going to transform the world, really wanted to make sure that that part, like Main Street USA, is included in that, can participate and can be early to it. And so it's a blast to get to work on all day, talking to business owners about this whole new world of monetary tech and how it can make things for their business better.
So you studied computer science. When did code first click for you, and who lit that spark?
There was a teacher of mine in high school named Dr. Cummins, and he really altered the trajectory of my life in a way that I'm grateful for. He was teaching computer science at the time in high school, which was the only kind of computing class in my small town high school, and the classes were in Visual Basic. And so when I was like 15 or so, I started programming in Visual Basic in his classes. And I was just hungry for it. I loved it. The idea of, you tell this magical machine what to do, and then it's got these inputs and it gives you outputs, and it's like all on you to kind of get right. Um, it was just so fun and interesting for me. And so I eventually just started reading a bunch of computer books. I took the computer science class, which was the only one that my school officially offered, and then I just kept asking them, like, what more can I do? And all of the faculty was very supportive. They even kind of let me just like work for their IT department basically and get credits and read big bulky computer books and get these certifications, like tech certifications, and kind of carve my own path, because I think they could just tell that I had an appetite for all of that. And so I knew that I wanted to study CS in school. I tried to stack up a bunch of certs. I got all of these certifications like Linux Plus and Server Plus and Network Plus and A Plus for computer repair. And I had like never even touched a Linux server by the time I had some of these Linux certifications. I was just like, I want to read all these books, and I would take notes on them at the library after school. And one fun memory that stands out is, I was in high school and I would buy these big thick books and I would drive to our community college and read them in the evenings. And I remember there was one night where this librarian came up to me, a very sweet lady, and she was like, "What are you majoring in? I'm just so curious because I see you here at the library more than any other student, and you must just have like an insane course load." And I was like, "I'm in high school. I'm I'm 16. I don't go to this college. I just love your library, and you have a great place to sit down and read books and take notes." And so that was always a big part of my journey, like independent study and self-study, and I just couldn't pull myself away from it.
So you started your career around 2008, right?
Yeah.
As the kind of the financial system was melting down, right? So how did that backdrop shape the way you thought about money?
It's pretty funny. At the time, it honestly didn't, which is hilarious because of, how centric all of that is to what we're thinking about now. But I was so just blinders on focused on the tech at that time that when I started my job at eBay, which was my first job out of college, so I worked as an intern for eBay for a summer and then returned full time. And I spent 4 years at eBay. And so I started at eBay in 2008. And in hindsight, I was really lucky because, everybody was getting squeezed. Everything was melting down. eBay had to do big layoffs. But I suppose I had the fortune of being a very affordable intern, but my job ended up being safe. But there were just like cubicles that, people were emptying their cubes out and taking boxes out the door, the way you would picture in these corporate layoffs. And it just like didn't even register with me. Hilariously, I was just so like, all right, I'm going to learn this tech. Like, I'm excited to be at eBay, like heads down. And I didn't even really process all of the macro stuff and how significant that was at the time. And it wasn't until looking back years later where I was kind of like, oh, wow, yeah, that was a big deal. And I'm pretty fortunate that it played out the way it did for me.
So eBay, cloud scaling, Nirvana, Intel, you saw scrappy startups and giant enterprises, right? Back to back. So what did each teach you that, you still carry today?
I loved getting to start my career at eBay, like fantastic people. Some of them became lifelong friends and we're still in touch. And it just taught me the ins and outs of big corporates. And there's a lot of stuff that big corporates can do that's great. And then there's a lot that can be not so great. There's a lot of process and red tape and unnecessary overhead that can develop in a corporate. And so I got to see what eBay did really well and, maybe didn't do as well in some ways, and then became enchanted with the idea of small startups around 2012. And a leader from eBay who I really admired left to join this tiny, scrappy cloud computing startup called Cloud Scaling in San Francisco. And I basically just bugged them constantly until they let me work for them. I interviewed, didn't get the job, and then just wouldn't shut up and kept showing up at, texting them and emailing them and just showing up all the time. And finally they were like, okay, we'll let you work for us. And got to see what a startup was all about. And small group of people, mission you really believe in, future that you can kind of see and go try to realize. I loved it and I was hooked. And I think I knew from that point forward that whatever I did in the future, I want it to be startup centric, whether that is employee, founder, investor, advisor, just love that territory. And that was my first foray into it. So I spent 4 years at Cloud Scaling. Also got the opportunity to go from individual contributor engineer to formally leading and managing people, which was something I had been wanting to do for a while at that point. And then Cloud Scaling was ultimately acquired by a storage enterprise called EMC, and then EMC was acquired by Dell. So it's kind of like a 2 acquisition chain of events. And I got to experience that roller coaster from tiny person company to acquisition by a larger enterprise.
Super cool. So you said that Ron Paul's campaign, Ayn Rand, Bastiat, Rothbard, these are some of the minds that pulled you into Austrian economics. What was the first idea that really kind of cracked your worldview wide open?
Reading Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged specifically changed my life in a big way. And I know she's a polarizing character. People either love her or they hate her. I found it inspiring. I think that prior to reading Atlas Shrugged, I had a view of the world that, maybe you're not proud of in some ways when you look back and you realize things, they make you cringe a little bit. But I think that I just didn't appreciate certain forms of work as much. I had these ideas in my mind of what is a good job and what is a noble job. And I remember feeling I'm going to have a good job. I'm not going to be one of these people who has a bad job or something. And reading Atlas Shrugged, I think just really gave me a profound respect for builders and people who work and have that sense of craftsmanship and capability that they bring to what they do. And whether you are a software engineer, a founder, a housekeeper, a carpenter, any blue collar, white collar, whatever it is noble and important. And doing work and being of service is just so valuable. And Atlas Shrugged opened my eyes to that in a lot of ways. And there's a theme in Atlas Shrugged too about money and about, why gold is kind of valuable and the not being able to just kind of print money and create value out of thin air for nothing, but things really need to be backed by work and things of substance. And so I think it planted the seeds with me that would later help me appreciate some aspects of Bitcoin earlier than I otherwise would have. Proof of work, something that is limited in supply, that cannot be inflated and printed at the whims of one or a handful of people. So grateful for that. And then Ron Paul's campaign kind of sent me down a related rabbit hole in 2000. So when he ran in 2008, it also changed my worldview because he was just talking about things that no other politician I had ever seen talk about. the other politicians are like, how much should we adjust the budgets in these big departments in the government? Like, should we increase the Department of Education's budget by 10% or should we lower it by 5%? And those are kind of like the two ends of the choice spectrum that you get. And then there comes this Ron Paul guy who's like, maybe we should eliminate this department. Maybe we should eliminate the IRS. Maybe we should eliminate the income tax. We didn't have an income tax for a while and we were still a country and stuff was still fine. And that kind of information just blew my mind. It made me completely reevaluate, like, is society and our government actually structured in a way that makes sense and is good, or did we drift to this place that we kind of are now locked into mentally? And so I got very excited about Ron Paul's campaign. On stage in one of the Republican primaries, he talked about Mises, Ludwig von Mises, who is one of the OGs of Austrian economics. And I thought, who in the world is Mises and what is Austrian economics? And so I went to a few of my friends who were econ majors. And I was like, tell me about this stuff. Tell me about Austrian economics, because I'm so curious. And their reaction was, what? Like, I've never heard of Austrian economics. And so that made me even more curious. Like, people are majoring in econ and they don't know about this school of econ. Like, what is this weird thing that is hiding from us or just not having the spotlight shown on it by mainstream academia? And so, yeah, I voraciously started reading Rothbard and Hayek and Mises. Still haven't finished Human Action, but I will one of these days. Carl Menger, and then more recently, like the Ethics of Money Production by Guido Holzman. And I found it so interesting how money in the monetary system can work, and that idea of central planning might not be the right way. Maybe the individual actors in an economy and the information that they have, which exists at the edges, maybe that is where decision making should happen. And price as an information signal, and the importance of not having that information signal be skewed by central planners, by price fixing, by inflating the money supply, really stood out to me and resonates with me and still does today.
So in 2010, you were an engineer at PayPal, right? When I think they censored WikiLeaks. So how did walk me through what you were thinking in that moment?
Yeah, that was back when eBay and PayPal were one big happy family. So that was still part of that 4-year chapter at eBay, but eBay owned PayPal during that time. And the relationship was very tight between the two. So like shared physical campuses and all that. So the building that I happened to work in was mostly PayPal employees, actually. I remember that all going down. And I, at the time, was working in the Network Operations Center, which is kind of first line of defense if there are incidents, whether it's like outages and something's breaking, or maybe something is being hacked, or there's like a denial of service attack going on. And so when PayPal chose to censor payments to WikiLeaks back then, it effectively cut off most of the funding. Most of the funding was coming in through PayPal to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks had shared a lot of documents about the US government and US military doing horrible things in the Middle East. And so there was a political uproar about it, and the White House, the administration it was very, very visible at that level. And so I think pressure was applied to PayPal to censor them, and PayPal chose to do that. And, at the time, like, my day job was like, okay, this thing's experiencing a denial of service attack, because then there was like backlash against PayPal. And so that online group Anonymous launched a denial of service attack against PayPal in response to that censoring. And so all of the teams that were doing the network engineering and changing the firewall rules to try to like defend against that stuff, that was just making the day-to-day really crazy. And I remember a lot of the rooms that I was in was just focused on like, can we keep the site up despite those attacks? But then when the dust settled on all of that and I was reflecting, it led to an interesting place, because I just thought, it was the first time I remember thinking, like, are we the good guys? Was that the right decision? Did we, WikiLeaks told the truth to the American public. They released, it was a hard truth. It was a truth that we as a country maybe wouldn't have been proud of. But there's a group of truth tellers that we censored. And so that caused a lot of introspection and interest in me. And I think that later, Bitcoin wasn't on my radar at the time. That was like around 2010, I think. And I didn't discover Bitcoin until 2012, didn't start buying any until 2013. But later, when I more seriously started researching Bitcoin, a lot of those seeds that were planted in that experience, I could feel them. Like it was very direct. And I remember just thinking, oh yeah, the centralization of money, the ability to censor payments. I've seen that. Like I have been inside of the machine that can do that. And so it definitely upped my appreciation for decentralized money with uncensorable payments.
Interesting. Cool. So I was gonna say, before Bitcoin, if you had to like bet your career on one idea, what would it have been?
I kind of did in a way on cloud computing. I remember, so I just really loved the infrastructure. I was never the best pure play software engineer in the world, but I really loved like the full stack of computing. And so, I always wanted to understand like where are these physical machines? Where are these servers? What are the data centers that they're in? How does all of that work? What is this network and switch fabric that lets it all talk and communicate? And how do the wires work? And I wanted to, cut myself on the screws and the metal in the data center, to really have a handle on that. And I was very close to the cloud computing movement. That word has been diluted in value over the years. Cloud is almost meaningless nowadays. But at the time, it was this very specific paradigm shift in how compute infrastructure was being delivered. And the idea that if you were going to found eBay later on, at that time, you wouldn't necessarily need to build a bunch of data centers and buy a bunch of computers. You could allow someone else to be the expert in the infrastructure layer. And then those providers would provide that over the internet as a service to you on demand. And so Amazon Web Services was, the biggest pioneer of that. Netflix was an enormous pioneer of that. They were the first large enterprise to really go all in on cloud computing. So at one point, 100% of Netflix's infrastructure ran on Amazon. Netflix didn't own servers. They had, tens of thousands of instances of basically Amazon servers that they would rent and use on demand. And so they didn't have to worry about all the metal. And so I felt like that was just a very powerful unlock for that ecosystem. And that was a big part of what I bet on by joining cloud scaling, and felt really excited to be so close to.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you're like coming at it philosophically via Ayn Rand and Dr. Ron Paul. You're sitting in PayPal, kind of seeing what's possible, right? And then simultaneously you're like shifting gears, and you're falling in love with like builders and startups. I mean, this is also interesting. So take us back. So you find Bitcoin, paint the scene. Where were you? Like, what were you doing? And what made you click the link?
Couple of funny stories about how I encountered Bitcoin. One is the friend who introed me to Bitcoin. He was, hitting me up about it a lot in 2012. And I thought I was too busy with my day job to pay attention to it. And so Bitcoin's like $3 a coin. And he's like emailing me like, hey, you should pay attention to this Bitcoin stuff. You should pay attention. And I just didn't have time for it at the time, unfortunately. But he actually ended up, ironically, not even ever owning any Bitcoin or even buying any Bitcoin. He was almost too brilliant for his own good. So he was a brilliant computer engineer. And rather than buying Bitcoin, he was like, hey, anybody can buy Bitcoin. Maybe mining Bitcoin is the way to really do it and accumulate Bitcoin. That's the smart way to go about it. But then he was like, but just, anybody with a PC could mine Bitcoin. I should build chips to mine Bitcoin. So he was trying to take a swing at being one of the first people in the world to produce a chip to mine Bitcoin, which would have been an FPGA and then later like an ASIC in chip nomenclature. And anyway, like long story short, rather than buy Bitcoin when it was $3 a coin, when he was really excited about it, he put his life savings into trying to make a chip to mine Bitcoin. And then that chip ended up not really working. And then around the same time, other chips hit the market, and then Bitcoin had already run up in price. And so he kind of like ended up hating Bitcoin as a result of that, despite being so early and never owned any. But through his nudgings, I did eventually start to pay attention to it. And then in 2013, early 2013, bought my first little bit. Mount Gox was melting down at the time. And so I think I like bought, and then the price immediately crashed from like $800 down to $200 or $100. And so it was this forcing function that in hindsight, I was grateful for, because it kind of makes you go, wait a minute, I bought this thing, it went down. Did I get scammed? Is this all nonsense? Like, it forces you to just question things and, do more research earlier than you might otherwise have. And I kept doing research, kept gradually buying, eventually discovered the writings of the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, which is an excellent nonprofit that I recommend anybody go check out. And a group of like Saifedean Ammous, Pierre Rochard, and Michael Goldstein were putting out fantastic content early on about Bitcoin through an economics lens, with a big emphasis on Austrian economics. And some of their early writings really made me understand that holding Bitcoin is a valid use and is important. And I think, at first it's like Bitcoin as money, and you think about payments, and you think that you should be going around and you should be just like spending these Bitcoin and paying for stuff in Bitcoin. I know that was naturally where my mind went initially. And some of Michael and Pierre's writings was like, you should hoard Bitcoin. You should buy this stuff and you should hold it. And if you do that, then like capital will accrue to you. And holding it is important because it helps the price go up, and the price going up helps more people get interested. And once trillions of dollars of capital have like found their way into this thing, then it'll later become useful for payments and for listing prices. And so just that whole notion of like holding is using, and store of value is a valid and important use case. It opened my eyes to. And I still think that is underappreciated today. A lot of other cryptocurrencies, people who are excited about other cryptocurrencies will say, oh, well, Bitcoin, what can you do with it? How do you really use it? And you read in between the lines of that, and they don't understand that holding is using. Protecting the value that you've worked really hard for is a valid use case. So you can hold Bitcoin and not do a single Bitcoin transaction for a year, and you've been using Bitcoin every day in a very valid way.
Yeah, no, I can definitely identify with your buddy though, because I was around back then, and just buying it and holding it just seemed too easy. It had to be harder. It had to be more complicated.
The sats that got away.
Yeah, exactly. Live and learn, I guess. But before, I was gonna say, so you said that you came for the tech and then stayed for the revolution. So when did that kind of flip happen for you?
That was between 2016 and 2019 when that all kicked into high gear for me. I think that I was skeptical of government and of authority and of power. I felt like the Federal Reserve and the central banks were stealing from everyday people, from hardworking people. I believed that I still believe this, that inflation is theft. We dress it up in fancy economic jargon to discourage everyday people from questioning it. They want to make it intimidating. They want to make people feel like they can't ask why inflation's okay, and put this veil over it of quantitative easing and fancy schmancy terms. But really it's money printing. And when you print more money, you steal value from people who are holding the money, trying to save. And it's in the US, there's a lot of emphasis on, oh, well, of course you shouldn't just hold dollars. Like, you're supposed to have retirement accounts and savings accounts and mutual funds and 60/40 portfolio and all of that. And so there's almost this like highbrow kind of attitude of like, well, of course you're not just supposed to hold the money. Don't you know that? And I always found that very off-putting. I understand why it exists. There's a lot of like, there's a whole realm of finance. And if you study a bunch of finance and spend a lot of your time and life and energy on that, then you want to feel like, you've learned something of value. But I think it's fundamentally broken if everybody has to do all of those financial gymnastics. People should be able to save, and they are being forced to invest. They're being pushed further down the risk spectrum. You can no longer hold dollars because dollars are broken. And so you have to have a high yield savings account. And then they break the money so much that you can't just have a high yield savings account. You have to have exposure to the S&P 500. And then at some point, is the money going to be so broken that you can't just hold the S&P? You have to like angel invest into a bunch of crazy, risky early stage stuff and like do call options on Robinhood. And it leads to a place just nihilism and badness. And those effects, even though they seem subtle, they cascade through society, and they cause capital misallocation and stress. And even people who don't understand or care about the economic details of it, they can just feel it on a subconscious level because they exist in the system and they feel themselves getting squeezed. They feel everything getting more expensive. And so I got really fired up about that. I mean, I still am today, as maybe you could tell, but I got really fired up about that around 2016 and 17. That was also the time that the civil war in Bitcoin around the block size was reaching resolution in a way that I was excited about. And I felt like Bitcoin passed that test. It defeated, it succeeded in like getting past that level, and that now it can go and, really help everyday people have a way to save again.
So Stephen, you've made over 70 plus angel investments with Bitcoin as your hurdle rate. What's the dumbest bet you ever made, and what did it teach you?
Man, I mean, that is a fun question. I'm definitely, not going to call out any specific, company or founder on this. I think that my strength is just seeing all of the ways that things can go right, and it's very easy to get caught up in the ways that things can go wrong. But if it's an early stage opportunity, like pre-seed, first round of capital into the company, there's going to be a million valid reasons why things might not work. And what you have to have the willingness to do if you want to participate in that type of investing is to see and understand and bet on the things that can go right. And so that's always been very fun for me, and I feel like that's been a strength of mine. But inherent in that is that it's very founder centric in the early days, and there are some founders who will like the difference between a founder who is so eccentric but in a good way and is going to go and like change the world completely and shake things up, and a founder who is like almost too eccentric and is, maybe not a blatant scammer, but is just like too far out there and too just like, there have been times where, I've made bets on founders who were almost like too eccentric or too extreme in a bad way, in an unrealistic way, in a way that was, where it almost just did end up being like, okay, it's pretty clear pretty quickly, this is just not going to work. And man, I don't even know if I'm like articulating that in the right way, because what I don't want to come off as saying, like, you shouldn't have this crazy belief in yourself. You shouldn't think that you can do way more and like set ambitious goals. You absolutely should swing for the fences, and you need to have a crazy belief in yourself because it will be tested when you're building a startup. But there are times when maybe bad actors almost can come in and try to use that same type of pattern matching and send similar types of signals in order to just get investment capital. And you live it, you live and you learn. But the vast majority of angel investments that I've done, even the ones that went to zero, there have been a handful that have gone to zero. Of course, that's the name of the game. But even those, I do not regret one bit, because there are things that they've made me better at in terms of developing my pattern matching. But there have also been so many qualitative benefits to it in terms of the connections and friends that you make, the perhaps intros that those founders where their specific business didn't work out, but you support each other and you're there for each other. And it's a great experience in terms of being that investor founder relationship. And then like some of the most amazing investments that I've had the privilege to be a part of have come through intros from other founders where maybe that company didn't quite work out.
So you went all in, right? You sold every altcoin, Bitcoin only. What was the hardest part of that conviction to hold in public back then?
I did go all in, and also in terms of fiat. Like I went all in every sense of the word. I cashed out my retirement accounts, took the penalties to do so, and put everything into Bitcoin. And I remember thinking that, it was helpful because through the magic of Twitter, you are able to connect with other people around the world who believe that same thing. So even if it's a small number of people around the globe and there's nobody else in your town or city who's doing that, you are kind of able to have that sense of shared belief in the future with people that you meet online. And so that was important for me in my journey. And I also just remember thinking that this might not work and you might get laughed at someday, or especially like TradFi and traditional like wealth managers will clearly point at you and be like, well, that was a dumb thing to do and you just shouldn't have done it. And so I had to accept that might happen and still be able to feel okay about the decision and about where you're at in life. And I thought, I think I'm smart and capable. And I think if I had to restart from zero, I could do so. I didn't have, kids or family at the time. I do now. But I also felt very philosophical about it. And I felt like Bitcoin represented something deeper than an opportunity to make a great return on your capital. It is a mission to end central banking and to end the scourge of central banking, really, to make the quality of life better for so many people by upgrading to this new form of money, the best form of money. And they're never going to let us vote on that at the polling place. It's never going to be solved with, votes in any kind of election. The vote for whether you want that future that you believe in is what you hold in your wallet. It's where you park your capital. And so I viewed what I was doing as the most powerful vote that I could cast for that better future that I believed in. And just felt like even if it didn't work out in financial terms, I would feel good feeling like I fought as hard as I could for something that I believed in.
And when did you know that you had to stop investing in other people's Bitcoin businesses and you would go, build one yourself?
The opportunity to be founder is something that I'm super grateful for. So ironically, I did a bunch of angel investing before ever having been a founder myself. I had two journeys as an early startup employee, cloud scaling, which we talked about, and then an AI infrastructure company in 2015 called Nirvana Systems that was later acquired by Intel. And so, fell in love with startups, felt like I knew, could appreciate a lot of the startup journey through that, but it's very different from having been a founder. And so a couple of years ago, when I reconnected with a friend of mine who's now my co-founder, Joao Almeida, he had the idea originally for what is now Castle, and he and I partnered up. So he's CTO, I'm CEO, and this is my first time in the co-founder CEO seat. And so I think for a lot of people, it happens in the opposite sequence. They're like founder first, and then they, get interested in angel investing and start cutting checks there. And for me, it's been the opposite. But they're synergistic. They feel like one makes you better at the other. Investing makes you a better founder. Being founder makes you a better investor. They feed off of one another, and there's a positive feedback loop.
So I guess pitch Castle to a plumber in Ohio who's never heard of Bitcoin. Like, what are you essentially selling him?
In the mid 90s, if you were a plumber and you realized the internet was going to be a big deal, and it might have been easy back then to ignore something like the internet and to think, well, the internet is a computer thing. And I'm a hey, special guest.
Yeah, he makes appearances every now and then, His
love it.
By the way, he just likes Bitcoin stories. So, anyways, that's
amazing. I've got a 3-year-old daughter on my side. She's not home right now, but she likes to make guest appearances too. So yeah, like if you were a plumber in the mid 90s, it would have been easy to ignore the internet and think, well, that's not relevant for me. I don't need to spend time thinking about that because that's a computer thing. And I don't have a computer company. But it turns out the impact of the internet was so transformative and so great that every kind of business needed eventually to embrace it. And the earlier ones to do it, if you were the first plumber in your town to have a website, an email, and eventually like do advertising online, you probably crushed it. Even if you're not as good at turning pipes as, and using wrenches as the guy down the street from you, you probably obliterated him in terms of growth because you understood that there is this important breakthrough in information technology. And I would say that today what we have is a breakthrough of similar magnitude and importance. And it is a breakthrough in monetary technology. And so if you are one of the first to upgrade your monetary tech to Bitcoin and to financial products that are made possible by Bitcoin, then you'll simply have more money. You'll make more money. You will be better positioned for growth of your balance sheet and of your business by performing this upgrade sooner than your competitors.
So you partnered with, how do you pronounce his name? Is it Joe or?
Joao. Yeah.
Joao from OpenNode. What does he bring that you don't? And how did you know he was going to be the co-founder?
Yeah, I'm super grateful to have Joao as my co-founder, and we have complementary sets of experience and strengths. So he's CTO. Prior to Castle, he was CTO and co-founder of OpenNode. OpenNode was really pioneering in payments in the Bitcoin space. So they were the first company in the world to really try to commercialize the Lightning Network. And he has a lot of scar tissue from learning firsthand how early we are for payments. Because even if a business is ready to accept payments in Bitcoin and they're all about it, you need both sides of the transaction. You need someone to walk into their business or come into their checkout flow digitally who's got Bitcoin and who wants to spend it. And so we're just, as much as like, I think that future is awesome and I believe we're going to get there, we are still so early for both sides of the transaction to be ready for it. And so he was incorporating a lot of the learnings from OpenNode into how we thought about our products and our strategy at Castle. We felt like SMBs, so small and medium businesses, are kind of overlooked and underserved. They're like often, cash flow positive. They have some profits. Maybe they want to gradually stack some Bitcoin, and we should just fully automate that for them. So that was our big first product, and still is our flagship product today, is fully automated ways for businesses to stack Bitcoin. So yes, you can do a smash buy, or you can do a DCA. You can buy Bitcoin through Castle in all the ways that everybody knows about. But businesses can also link up their bookkeeping software or their payment system. And that link takes 60 seconds. Like you go in, you link your Stripe account, you link your Square account, you link your Shopify account, and then we just give you a slider bar that you can move to tell us how much of the money that you're making you want to automatically go into Bitcoin. And so, like, if you know that you want 3% of your revenues to go into Bitcoin, you link up your Stripe account, you set it, you forget it, and then it just goes. And you'll always be allocating that percentage of your business to Bitcoin. And so it's extra satisfying. Like, when we do team building stuff, we'll go to restaurants that are Castle customers, and we pay the bill the same, like we pay in credit card, and we look around the restaurant and everybody's paying in credit cards. So it's no friction for the customers. They don't have to be doing anything differently. But we know that behind the scenes, 3% or 4%, whatever number the business owner has set, is automatically going into Bitcoin under the hood. And it feels extra satisfying to do a team dinner when you know that that a percentage of the proceeds are going to stack Bitcoin behind the scenes. So that was our first like flagship product. And what we've realized is there's a lot of financial offerings that are made possible by Bitcoin that we can bring to business owners. And so we are actively cooking on some stuff that we're really excited about. And we can, probably chat more another day soon on. But we got some stuff that we're pretty stoked to bring to market that we feel like will ultimately just help businesses be stronger.
Yeah, maybe we can cover that one, in due time. So Boost VC, Winklevoss, Park Rangers, Epoch, you guys did a $1 million pre-seed recently. It was oversubscribed. What did the best investor conversations have in common?
It was a really funny, gradually then suddenly dynamic, as is often the case in fundraising, where we had a bunch of convos and like refining the pitch and just getting the investors to really understand what we were about. We weren't quite getting there. And so we were putting a lot of reps in and not getting any commitments. And then Boost VC was, they led our round. And once Boost agreed to lead, which we're super grateful to have them in our corners, then the raise kicked into high gear and it came together super fast. And so it's that funny dynamic of like, it's hard. And then you find a lead or you find someone to kind of anchor. And then suddenly it's like, yes. It comes together really quickly. And that was true in our case. I think what was in common among the conversations, especially everyone who ended up being a yes, was when we really got to the mission part of this. And in the pre-seed days, a lot can change around like business model and details of how you think you're going to go about something. But when we were able to show them that like there is this segment of the market, these cash flow positive small and medium businesses that have never had something purpose built for them. Every other platform out there has been like built for retail or built for Wall Street. And then they can kind of support all those businesses in the middle, but it's more of an afterthought. And we're just obsessed with like every day we wake up and we think about how to serve these customers, these types of business owners. And that's our whole world. And, when we started to, I think, get there with the investors around what the size of that market is, the opportunity to specialize and build something of substance for them. And the fact that like for us, it comes from such a deep place of, it's meaningful to us. We want to support it. I grew up in a small town, I grew up Main Street, USA. And we're not tourists in this. Like we're Bitcoiners who've been in Bitcoin for a long time and believe in this and think that we just really see an opportunity to empower people. Then once we really got there, like who we're empowering and what it can mean for them and for the world, then it's a refreshing conversation and it's easier and it feels like it's easier to get to yes. And I'll give a shout out too, like one of our investors, Park Rangers Capital, founded and led by Erica Wenger. She's incredible. absolute just machine when it comes to like supporting founders. If there's any founder out there listening, wondering like who you should raise early stage VC from, please talk to Erica and read her essay, Elephants, Not Unicorns. So she wrote this piece basically talking about like, we say the word unicorn and it's kind of got all this hype and flashy aura around it. But this notion of be an elephant, be this creature, like be something of substance where you are playing a very long-term game with a long-term orientation, and you're not some like flash in the pan that is hype driven. Like be an elephant. That I think a ton about. I love that framing. And I want to just see that kind of orientation more prevalent in the industry broadly. And so we often, think about that type of writing and approach at Castle too.
Yeah, it really resonates. So most SMB high yield savings products lose money to inflation. So how bad is this problem really, and why hasn't anyone fixed it before?
Why anyone hasn't fixed it before can get to a really fun, borderline conspiratorial sounding place. But I would say um, I think it's a borderline scam. I think it's tragic. I think that it preys on those who are most vulnerable. Just the nature of the monetary system. The people who are fine in a central banking type of economy where we're constantly injecting a bunch of money into the system, they're the people who are closest to the money printer. They're the central bankers, they're the primary banks, they're the corporations who are customers of their primary banks, and they get access to the new money soonest. So they get to benefit from it the most. They get to go and spend it before it has trickled through the system and prices have had and wages have had the chance to adjust to its existence. And so it is this constant, insidious transfer of wealth from people who are out there working hard, trying to save, trying to get by, trying to grow their business, to people who have access to the money printer. And Bitcoin crushes that. And that's important. And the framing even around these products, like high yield savings accounts that give you 3.5% or whatever, it's not really high yield if the money supply is being debased by more than that amount every year. So psychologically, you think that you are getting ahead. You think, well, I'm getting ahead by maybe 4%, but you're not. At best, you're staying in the same place. And often you're actually falling behind, because even the ways that they measure official inflation are quite questionable. They're very good at cherry picking the things that make the numbers look the prettiest. And really, the inflation is often more like 8 to 12% per year, if you measure hard assets and things that are very difficult to fudge numbers around. So that is just an enormous problem in society. And I think that like we're so excited to be able to fix that. We think if you hold Bitcoin and if you use other types of products that can give you returns that are greater than standard savings accounts can offer, that are perhaps enabled fundamentally by Bitcoin under the hood, then that actually helps businesses get ahead. That helps us get to this place where we're able to adopt this new architecture for the monetary system. And the playing field is level. It is no longer tilted in favor of the elites at the top.
So Bitcoin treasury companies right now are having a moment, right? What do most of them get right? And where's the risk that most people aren't pricing in or are not pricing in?
This is something I'm really glad you asked, because it's something I'm fired up about recently. So Bitcoin treasury company. When I say those words, like anyone listening, hearing those words, who comes to mind? What do you picture? It's probably Michael Saylor. It's probably Strategy. It's probably, one of these, publicly traded, big like Bitcoin treasury companies that has gone all in and really bet the farm on this and accessed capital markets and done all kinds of financial engineering in order to try to make this strategy work. And I think Michael Saylor's great. I think it's a big net positive for the world. But what is lost in the sauce is that Bitcoin treasury company shouldn't just mean that. It doesn't have to mean you have to be a big corporation, and doesn't have to mean that you have to go all in on this thing. And what is getting all of the headlines and all of the attention today is that strategy. It's a very extreme strategy. It's high risk, high reward. And what's getting lost is that most Bitcoin treasury companies are not going to look that way. And so what I think is important is remembering the church that holds Bitcoin, the coffee shop that holds Bitcoin, the restaurant, the 80 location retailer across the Southwest US that holds Bitcoin. Those are Bitcoin treasury companies. That's what we want to help remind the world about and shine a light on at Castle. And we want to build products for organizations and businesses like that to empower them and make sure that we can go from, maybe tens of thousands, like maybe there's, 20,000 or so of those types of businesses in the country today. There's 35 million potential, business Bitcoin treasury companies in the US that are not yet doing this or thinking about it. And so the opportunity is incredible.
You said that every business will eventually upgrade to Bitcoin over the next decade. So what does year one look like versus year 10?
For like the country, or
yeah, well, you said
Castle?
you're US focused, right?
We are. So yeah, Castle is only available in the US. We're available in all 50 states. So even New York, Hawaii, Alaska, we got you. And
what
yeah,
about your, what is it, 54th state? What are we now up here in Canada?
Yeah, and territories too.
Topic, I guess.
yeah. Once we're going to make the moon the 51st state, so we'll be able to serve the moon. The first, it's probably going to be, what will be business number one on the moon? It'll probably be a Tesla diner on the moon. Elon, when it's time, we've got you at Castle. Don't worry, you'll be fine. We'll help you stack Bitcoin. But yeah, for the next 10 years and what it's been at Castle, it's like so far with this $1 million pre-seed that we raised last year, we're just being obsessive about our humble group, small group of early adopters that we have. We try to talk to business owners every single day about this and make sure that we are just being obsessive with the details for them and bringing a sense of craftsmanship to what we do. And now the theme is, increase our partnerships that allow us to expand. We're now partnered with BitGo. And so through them, and, they're now an OCC chartered federal trust bank. That has been a big part of how we're able to expand and serve the entire country and all US territories, is through partnership with BitGo. They're, qualified custodian. Our product is custodial by default. So you accumulate Bitcoin through Castle. Those are in custody at BitGo. But if you are advanced, or if you just have some other preference around custody, you can withdraw them to any wallet you want, anytime you want to. And in 10 years from now, I think we'll be at this place where we won't even really say Bitcoin treasury company, just like the dentist office down the street from my house, they use the internet for their point of sale device and all of their computers, but we don't call them an internet company. It'll just be, Bitcoin will be like that. It will be so woven into the fabric of finance for businesses that we just won't even frame it that way and talk about it that way. It will just be the money, and it will be how the money moves. And we want to be a part of that. We just really want to do our part alongside other great Bitcoin companies to move the needle on that, so that we can realize that future faster, because we think it's better for business owners.
Awesome, Stephen. Well, what an interview, man. I was going to say, do you want to maybe tell people the website for Castle, and then also where do they learn more about you?
Yeah, we are savewithcastle.com, and we're Save with Castle on all social media, X, Instagram, all those good places. I'm going to up our Instagram game. We were talking earlier before we started recording about doing those selfie style videos. So follow Castle on Instagram if you want to see more of my face spouting off Bitcoin stuff on your stories. And then I'm on Twitter, pretty active on Twitter. I'm STHENC on Twitter. That's like S then C. And yeah, if there's any, whether you are a business owner curious about Bitcoin powered finance products, or you're like working on cool startup stuff, like my DMs are open. I love connecting with people. I've had life-changing connections through Twitter and X. So hit me up.
Awesome. Okay, we'll bring this one to a close. Stephen, you got to come back. I'm like just scratching the surface with all my questions. I've got many more, but amazing. What an awesome business idea. And so I wish you the best of luck. Hang around for a minute, Stephen. I'm just going to bring this one. Any last words? Are we good?
Thanks so much for having me, Sonny. We appreciate the opportunity. Would love to do it again soon.
Awesome. All right, just give me 1 minute. Okay, bye everybody. Until next time. Take care.